You're listening to the Topco Business Unusual podcast. Now, the Business Unusual podcast. Learn from the greatest minds in business today. Interviews hosted by Ralf Fletcher. Learn how to improve business, get tips from industry leaders, and be motivated by real-life experience. Topco, Business Unusual.
And just welcoming you officially to the podcast, Ciko. So Ciko Thomas, the executive for Nedbank Retail and Business Banking. It's great to have you on the Business Unusual podcast. I mean, we're just catching up and just.
Thanks, Ralf. We just dive straight into it. Sorry.
Just drive straight into it, which is great.
Yeah.
It's all natural. And, you know, I'm sitting here in Cape Town and you're in Durban. You look like you're in a better location than me. So it's great to have you on the podcast and obviously going through some of your upbringing. I mean, I read somewhere one of your biggest role models was obviously your father. And I understand he worked. Was it for VW?
He worked for General Motors.
General Motors.
Yeah. He was a factory worker. Died in the blue collar worker, and an upright family man in every way possible. Kind of worked hard for his values. A hard man. Valued a disciplined, structured, hard day of work, whether it was doing chores around the house, whether it's an example that you said. Both my parents, my mother worked for everyone works in the car industry in Port Elizabeth, and certainly at that time that's what it felt like. My mother worked for an industrial textile factory. So both these people were just incredibly upright, rock solid members of their community, solid network of friends who were very similar in values and just instilled a lot of those values of decency, value education, value community, hard work, and just don't be dumb, in the way that you carry yourself in life. Two people that I really looked up to, both my mother and my father, and especially the male role model in the house was my father as an only son.
Oh, the only son. Okay, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a story you went to the factory one day and he proudly should have showed you around.
Yeah. I think I was about 9. And this is kind of like your dad taking you into the workplace, into his workplace. And it's an assembly line. It was actually the paint shop at the General Motors plant in PE. It's a hard place. This place is steaming. It's hot. You've got this man who work and they're assembling cars and they're moving doors and they're painting, and just like this dripping sense of this embodiment of hard work. But the camaraderie on the work floor was incredible. These are people who genuinely had a working camaraderie, a chemistry of working, and most importantly, they all respected each other. They all just came across as people who had an incredible amount of respect for each other. A lot of them, because they socialized together. These are people I knew in my father's social circles. So I would see them around the house on weekends. They'll come for a drive, for whatever it was over weekends. But to see them in the workplace really kind of formed a picture of what work looks like, what teamwork looks like, what role modeling and camaraderie and the importance of that in the workplace looks like. And it must have shaped me later on in life because it's something I've always valued. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so funny because my wife's grandfather was a spray painter for VW. He did all the GTIs in the days. Also from Uitenhage, my wife's maiden name's Van Staden, that bridge up there. But
that's interesting, eh? Interesting.
Yeah. So he's one of those. But I mean, I look and I say South Africa's in a unique position. We've got many people, blue collar workers, And there's almost a desperation. How do we take people from that situation into corporates, into entrepreneurship? And I mean, that's your journey. I mean, I mean, sometimes I don't think we appreciate the value of those opportunities. Possibly, am I saying that correctly, or the lessons? Or, I mean, you've just. I never really thought about it like that. It was the first time you've come to work. I bring my kids to work, so I suppose they get some idea of what work looks like. You saw teamwork. I mean, that's so important, right? I mean, you see it in sport, but to see it in a working environment, and then you're seeing them socially as well.
Yeah, I bring, with the work that I do now, I mean, the context is very different. I bring my kids to work, and my kids are in high school. They're almost in matric, and I bring them to my workplace, and the context and the environment is very different. They're coming to an executive workplace. Dad is an executive at a bank, and they see that. But every time I get one of them in a situation, they sit in the background and they must shut up and observe what happens in a meeting. In my mind, because what I experienced the first time I went into that assembly line, the teamwork and the camaraderie was so important. It's something that is still people must work together. People must have a common purpose. And I've sat in corporate meetings where there's a big boss who runs the show. And it's all about what the big boss expects and the voice of the big boss, and everyone else around the helical table is a spectator in the meeting. And all it is postboxing in response to what the expectations of what the big boss wants. It's very important that they see camaraderie and each voice coming in, and they value that, because these are the things that bring that to my mind build happy working compacts. And you started off around South Africa, and I think that one of the things that we're going to have to think about to South Africa is, what is the working compact that we are going to sign on to make this economy work again? Yeah.
No, I mean, I have the same situation. My dad founded this business, and in many ways, he also, he worked in a factory when he was 15 years old, and did all sorts of things. But I think it's understanding people. We're in the business of people, and we've got to make people do things. And it's not easy, because you read a lot of books about executives leading and managing and visions and missions. But geez, you got to be working with those people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think ultimately, if you lead with humanity, if you lead with your authentic self and humanity, and a little bit of what you said, and just recognizing that the people that you work with are also humans. They've got things that turn them on and off. You have to deeply understand those and work to those to get the best out of people. That for me is simple leadership. That's really it. It's not titles and positions and all those other things. People are able to work with you and recognize you as a leader if you see them.
Yeah, and you had good values, like you said. You had the relationships, and so I mean, you get these scholarships. I mean, were you exceptionally bright or good at sport, or what was the?
I think I could. I was pretty kind of. I mean, I played everything. You throw a ball my way, I'll fumble my way through it. I do the same thing on golf courses. I love walking through golf courses. I'm absolutely useless at golf, but I love I love playing golf. So no, I was never particularly good at golf. Although I'm an absolute sports nut. I'm the guy you want in your sports quiz team.
Okay.
I'm that guy.
Okay.
And I wasn't exceptionally bright, I think, but I just worked hard. I kind of realized quite early that I do want to have a university education. I do want to have a proper university education, and my family circumstances are not going to allow me to be able to afford a university education. So if I'm going to get to university, I'm going to have to scrounge for scholarships and bursaries. And to do that, I'm going to have to work at getting decent marks. So I had to work. So I was very diligent. So that culture of, there's time to study, and I was all in. I love a good party and a good drink, but when it's time to knuckle down and work through those books, I'm there. I'm that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you tell the story about learning about marketing and being introduced to Unilever. And they introduced you and they gave you a book and you read it straight away from cover to cover.
Yeah.
So you're not one to idle around and think about things. You're a man of action.
Completely. Sometimes to a fault. Sometimes I do have colleagues who say, I've sometimes my bias for action can throw people off. But I like to get things done. I like to get on with things. That story about the book, exactly it. This guy said to me, do you know anything about this topic? I said, no, I think that marketing is about selling. They said, well, it's a little bit more about that. The guy came out and wrote on a piece of paper, they wrote to Philip, the classic Philip Kotler marketing textbook, analysis, planning, implementation, control. And they said, go and find this and see, rummage through it and see if you can relate to it. And the thing was 23 chapters long, and I spent the weekend going through all 23 pages. And then I figured out at the weekend, I'm on top of this. I know everything about marketing. Yeah. But it speaks to what you were talking about, that, the opportunity was that, okay, well, there's a task to be done, get on with it.
Yeah.
So I've got a huge bias for action.
Yep. And I mean, there you are, a young guy, you're studying chemical, I think it's engineering or chemicals. And then you have this meeting, this chance meeting, read this book, and then you're changing. You put the COVID word pivot, but I mean you completely change trajectory in something you didn't even know. And we talked earlier, and I was saying, what's driving these big decisions? Because sometimes when we're young, we get told to stick to the plan. But when you're young, do you really have a plan that you know? So there's the one side, and then you come across these situations. You follow your gut or your instinct, or because I think sometimes we talked about it also earlier. We box ourselves into I'm going to stick to this. And so on that inflection point, what is it you're saying to yourself, or what are the questions you're asking of yourself to make these big, bold, courageous moves?
I think there's a bit of necessity to it as well. Look.
Mother of all invention.
So again, picture the situation. I've just kind of gotten to a point at uni. I either stay on, do masters and postgrad because I studied science, kind of work my way to a PhD, or I go and work and earn a salary, And fortunately, I had zero commitments at the time. I didn't have scholarships that required me to work and pay back and any of those things. I had it's probably the one time in my life where I had choice on one hand and complete freedom, and the complete sense of freedom. Kind of swimming in tandem together, which is beautiful. It hasn't happened as nicely since. There's kids and there's all sorts of other things.
You used it all up.
Do you know what I mean? So this guy, I go and interview with Unilever, and Unilever is an incredible organization, and
incredible.
They build incredible careers, certainly at the time, and they still do, for people who've got aspirations to build careers for themselves. They're famous for marketing, but they do it for engineers and HR people, et cetera, et cetera. I've met many people, who will stand and say, oh, I also started work at Unilever, and these are very successful people professionally. So there was that opportunity on the one hand. I could have studied, I had a scholarship with an energy company, so I could have gone and worked in the lab there, so there was that option. And I had an opportunity to go and work at the factory, at the brewing factory, and train as a brewer at SAB then, straight after varsity. So I had that option as well. I went and worked at SAB later, but I had those options. So I had this choice. And then there was a sense of adventure, because the other thing that Unilever offered me was the opportunity to work in Durban. I'd never lived in Durban. I didn't know Durban. The first time I got onto an aeroplane first, and secondly, the first time I saw Durban was when I went to the Unilever interviews. They flew us from Cape Town to Durban, So I thought, geez, what a nice place. It's got decent weather, carefree life, beautiful stretch of ocean. Love this place. I could live here. It's different. People look wonderful, and
good
so
golf.
I was excited by that. Yeah, good golf, and so that's what influenced my choice at that point in time. I was like, I'll do the Unilever thing. And also there was this thing called marketing.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a departure from what I kind of shaped myself. So again, I didn't want to box myself and say, I'm this science guy, I'm going to go and do marketing, whatever this thing that I discovered in this textbook looked like, I'm keen to do this thing in this new town. So that was a big inflection point professionally. And I didn't ponder over it too much. It was not a big decision. I was sitting around with a couple of mates, and I remember vividly, actually, I was sitting with a guy called Sarami Topco, who was a big mate of mine, who's the CEO of Telkom. We'd varsity together. But Sarams and I were sitting having a beer somewhere, and I said, dude, this is what I'm doing. And he said, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I'm also going to Unilever, by the way. I was interviewing with them. I was like, cool. And China is going with me to Durban. And he's a Durban boy. He grew up in Durban. So I said, geez, it's nice. I'm going to have a reference mate, a mate of reference. So there's a bit of adventure to it.
Yeah.
Well.
It sounds like it's really cool. And I want to talk a little bit about marketing, because what have you learned from marketing and Unilever? You talk about it being a great school. Is it the sort of thing that you think any entrepreneur or career-orientated person should be looking at organizations, multinationals, big corporates for careers, because of it's an extension of a university degree almost? What is it that it does for you? Is it the practicality? Is it the comfort? Is it the, what is it that you can make mistakes and fail?
It's actually not, for me, it's actually none of those things.
Okay.
I think there's a notion called kind of professionalism and how you conduct yourself, that the opportunity of working for big companies, big well-established companies, multinationals, there's big, the World Banks, etc., because you're working in an extremely formal environments often that have got sets of rules, etc., and you could be the biggest maverick, but you understand that I'm a maverick in the context of an environment that's got some formality and some rigors. So how do I adapt the fact that I'm a maverick into this environment? And that is an incredibly important growing point for a lot of young people. And I find that every time I chat to, I'm sounding like those old fogies, but I chat to a lot of young people and they don't like that. Said, yeah, this is too formal, it's corporate, it's too formal. And they forget and they lose out on the opportunity of what it can do to change themselves and to try to be really transformative in the way, because in life, you're going to be working with people. And you never work with people on your terms. Hardly ever. I don't care who you are. You could be the wealthiest people. You could be the wealthiest person on earth. You're always going to engage people on their terms, not on your terms, often. And how you learn to adapt to that, I find these big institutions are able to teach you and shape you to learn what that means. Yeah.
It's interesting because
so that was a big learning point for me professionally.
Yeah, it's almost like a designer saying they want creativity, but you think of the creativity that's needed when you're working for an organization like Coke. There's a brand that's established for 100 years. There's not too much outside of that you would think you can go, but they find creative ways to move around it. And it's the same thing, right? That's where the actual genius comes out, when you have limitations, not when you don't.
Absolutely. That's where inventiveness comes through. And that's where how, because these things are not about, I've got the greatest of this product on earth. I've done it. I've said by myself. You almost never find yourself working on it on your own. You need the guy who's going to build the lens. Is it the right lens? Is it the right shape? Should it be round or circular? Or should it be helical? Whatever it is. And to do that, you need other people. And if you haven't learned the art of connecting, engaging, coaxing, negotiating, accommodating other people, you're never going to get, don't care who you are, you could be the greatest design genius on earth, you're never going to get to the ideal product.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about products in your time at Unilever, you had some successes and you had some, let's say, failures, but are they ever, in some ways, we thought of naming this podcast sort of the wrong way to fail is the right way.
Yeah. No, I mean, if I kind of extend the lens to both Unilever and SAB, because I kind of did a stint, an extended stint in marketing in both consumer goods organizations. I looked after a brand at SAB called Lion Lager, which was a complete failure in the market, and we had to discontinue it,
Yeah.
But in the journey of discontinuing Lion Lager in attempts to revive it, rethinking the brand, what it stands for, what is proposition, how do we think about go-to-market, how do we think about every single part of that product. I probably learned more working on that brand than if I'd worked for a so-called successful brand in that organization, because again, a little bit where you started, the successful brands, it give you very little tinker room. And yeah, I mean, at some point, we changed the label. I mean, Lion Lager is an iconic brand, man. It's one of South Africa's most iconic brands ever. It's got a gold foil with a red grounding lion, but it's red, We went and changed that and launched a blue label onto the market. And everyone said, what the hell are you guys doing? We said, we're experimenting. Now, who gets given the privilege of working with and change the label from red to blue? I did that. That's my claim to fame.
How did you get that right? That alone is a success.
100%. It goes back to what I spoke to you about, because in my mind, I was convinced that, and we worked as a team, right? As part of a team, but what was at the heart of that decision was that beer is old, male, stodgy in South Africa. And we're talking late 90s here. And if beer brands don't wake up and become sexy, youthful, funky, and appeal to a much younger market and energize themselves like alcoholic fruit beverages at the time we're doing, the beer category was in trouble in the long run. So we said, let's go and launch a beer brand for young people. And so part of that was an entire repositioning of what the brand stood for. And we shifted it from here and we took it to here because we wanted to learn. And what we learned about marketing beer to young people out of that failed brand experimentation has now set the blueprint for everything that SAB does for young people. That playbook was designed, the early parts of that work were set about in the work that we did when we changed that label from red to blue.
It's incredible, eh? And it's funny that you say that whole red to blue, and now everything we drink is blue, light, free, cool. And do you think, because we talk about beer and changing consumers, but the world's evolving all the time, are there lessons that any brand or any business person could learn from that? I mean, are there what are the things that you think are timeless that you can learn? Because in many ways, their learning was done a little bit later. Once you learn that maybe it's not this brand that should do it, is it that you need to? Is it like that innovator's dilemma that you need to invent something new and different as opposed to mess with the current ingredient? Or what if you went back in time? What would you do again?
Yeah, so there's something that I'm very big on as a leader now, and I encourage a lot of kind of the younger minds and the younger energy in the organization is that, so my job is to create a safe space for people to learn and experiment fast. So experiment fast. And I find that, we have a corporate culture in large corporate South Africa that doesn't actually allow us to experiment and learn fast. Once companies create the playbook of success, big, and the compliance people come in and the accountants come in and they set the rules, there's very little wiggle room for people to learn. So the whole notion of experiment, learn fast, fail fast, and be very clear about what you want to see out of that experiment is going to be very important. It's important, but it's going to be a very important characteristic as well of how we build, how we think about this economy going forward as well.
I mean, these are really exciting things you're talking around. And I suppose I've got two questions. One is, how do you create that safe space? But also, I saw another podcast that you did, and it spoke around, didn't go into detail, but it talked around, you're very particular about the numbers. And I'm wondering, because some people think, I'm being measured, the numbers or whatever. But hey, listen, if you want to fail fast, then you need to be measuring something. So don't look at it as a bad thing. Like, the numbers are there to help you and me both make better decisions. I mean,
yeah. So it goes back to a little bit where we started around. I'm incredibly particular about preparedness.
okay.
So I spend
a
lot of time preparing the research, the background, put the story together. And often the story gets told in business through the numbers. If we do this, this is the frontier of commercial possibility. This is what you can get. And you can never suck up numbers in the air. You have to prepare them. You have to show that there's a market and there's X amount of people who will buy it at a certain price. And if you get Y amount of market share, this is what it translates into revenue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't get into the boring detail of that in your preparation, you're going to fail. And you're never going to convince people who make investment decisions that it's worth putting investors' hard money behind a project. And so you end up then failing because you didn't prepare, and then you end up looking for alibis and say, this company is rigid. They don't allow entrepreneurs to thrive. They don't allow innovation. And actual innovation is not the sexy iPhone and the sexy device that you can create. It's in how you put the entire storyline end to end. And the big part of that is there a compelling and underlying commercial reason for this? Prove it.
Prove it. Yeah. My dad used to have a saying. He said, PPP equals PPP. Piss poor planning equals piss poor performance. So I don't know how relevant that is, but
absolutely.
If you plan badly, you're going to perform badly, and that's in any race, in life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ralf, numbers aren't sexy for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Numbers scare people.
Like, not banks, but I mean, is that?
No, just like people, you'll hear someone say, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not a numbers guy. It's like, what are you talking about? You have to be a numbers guy to be an entrepreneur. What crap is that? You can't be a successful entrepreneur if you can't live in the numbers. It's in the numbers.
Yeah, because the numbers have got to say something positive. Because if they're not, then you got to change something.
They've got to sell a compelling vision of the future, and they are the thing that holds you, that you get measured against as you work. Because often it's not your money, right? It's investors' money. So they measure you on your yardsticks and what you achieve, and often it's numerical what you achieve, whether it's sales or profit or whatever it is. And if you're not close to those numbers, how are you going to stay close to what your investors are looking for?
And so how do you teach that with your team? Because it is a big thing, right? And sometimes we want to lose focus and talk about creativity or transformation, but if we're not looking at the numbers, all those things are very hard to push the needle on.
Yeah, I'm fortunate in that, I have the privilege now of being able to shape what I recruit for.
Yeah.
So I place a very heavy emphasis on the two sides of the coin. Of course, I want to see innovative, future-focused, creative outlook, but you need to have a very good sense of numbers. You have to be, you have to be commercially savvy. You have to have a nose for the rands and cents. And I'm never going to be beguiled by one over the other. I want both. I'm not interested. I'm not going to sell myself short.
So, I mean, I'm not sure if this comes from your entrepreneurial endeavors into the sort of motor industry, or did it come when you were younger? Were you selling things? Were you making money? Were you trading when you were at school, or were you ever entrepreneurial at varsity? Did it just like evolve, this entrepreneurial sort of numbers beast that came out?
No, it didn't. I wasn't selling things or anything like that. Kind of money was tight growing up.
Yeah.
So you kind of understood the concept of trade-offs intuitively. It's a textbook or a video game. Can't be both.
It's one or the other.
You know what I mean?
Trade-offs.
So you kind of understand trade-offs very early in life, and having the kinds of parents that I described earlier on, they were very happy to drill those into you, that it's either nothing or it comes with a trade-off.
Yeah.
And often it's going to be nothing unless you really prove that you're worth it. So show us the marks, show us that you've applied yourself, show us that you need that extra pair of shoes, show us first, then we'll buy it for you. But when we buy it for you, it comes at the expense of something else, either of your own or a sibling, or something that we don't get at home. So we buy a smaller basket of groceries that week because we've had to buy you a nice pair of sneakers, whatever it is. So you kind of grow up quickly, and you kind of get a sense of, you become numerically savvy very early.
I love that show us, because it's one of our principles, actually. Don't tell me, show me. And I think customers want it as well. Customers want you to not tell you anything. Show me how good you are. Show us what you're doing for us. So if you're learning that at an early age. So, I mean, the motor trade, I mean, I don't know many people that don't like cars. There's millions sold. Some are more addicted to others. I've got a Mustang 1966. So that I'm giving the game away a little bit. But I mean, so I what a lovely thing to do, own a.
It's fantastic.
And I mean, what did you learn from that? Moving from the SAB, the Unilever, to suddenly being, I don't know, an entrepreneur in the full right. I mean, you spoke earlier, the first couple of hours, 2 hours or whatever it was.
No, and again, I mean, we sold BMW, right? I mean, when we started, ours was the first kind of black-owned BMW dealership in the history of this country, at the time. We set up the first one. And the first thing, so you learn selling, you have to sell.
Yeah. We spoke about that earlier as well. I mean, is it how, because I sometimes get this sense that selling, the word, is a swear word in many places in South Africa. It's seen as cheap, nasty, but I don't know an entrepreneur or a business person that without sales, they cannot run their business and the economy is not going to be ticking over.
I don't know, the kind of fabled entrepreneurs, the Bill Gates of this world and the Steve Jobses of this world, all of those kind of legendary guys. I don't know if those guys sat there and think that we are super entrepreneurs without thinking how many MacBook Airs have I sold today, I really don't, there must have been something about Jeff Bezos when he went to tally up the early stages of Amazon.com and said, hell, how many books did I sell today? Because what else was he worrying about?
Yeah.
If he wasn't worried about selling. So it's at the heart of everything, and the usual nonsense that you hear about, cash is king. Absolutely, cash is king. If there isn't cash in your business, if those tills and bring in cash in the bank, get it ready to buy more, functioning at a rate of infinity. If you don't understand that interrelationship, you are going to be out of business.
Yeah.
So that whole notion of cash being the lifeblood of business and selling, and then the third thing to it is you're never going to sell if you don't have good relationships with customers. If you can't create customer intimacy, you're dead in the water. So part of the charm of our story as Black entrepreneurs, so we're running this business, and I had to worry about, our cars in the service room at 8 in the morning. You know how, in the dealership, the guys will bring in their cars for service, and I had to put the mechanics upstairs, and we kind of created a bit of a mythology. There's two guys who were enterprising, and they started the Black dealership. So a lot of guys came to the dealership to interact with us. Buy a car and listen to the story, make me feel good. So it meant that you had to spend the time with the customers. And if we did not spend that amount of time being intimate with the customers and giving them a compelling reason to combine them, if I'd locked myself in the office because I was busy telling up the books, we wouldn't have been successful. People wanted to be with us. People wanted to, drive that bond of intimacy between us as the owners of the business and the product and themselves as customers. So if you don't have the personality to build relationships, you're not going to be successful in business. Generally, as a general rule of thumb, you have to be nice to someone.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're not nice to your customers, you have to be nice to your bankers, your suppliers. You have to be nice to someone.
Yeah, it's about relationships, right? It's you've got to build those. We're humans, and that's humanizing a business is about having relationships, because people don't buy from companies; they buy from people.
They buy from people, always. I mean, I cannot imagine a product of some value that I buy, even to this day. I buy where I don't have a relationship. Where I scrounge for my wine, I buy them at the spot I go at, because I've got a bloody good relationship with the guy across the counter.
I was going to ask you, being in banking and looking at Black entrepreneurs and how you could help them, what would your advice be to growing I think we all are aware, to grow the economy, there's so much we can grow as corporates, but really it's around how do we grow Black entrepreneurs? How do we grow our entrepreneurs in this country is critical. It's absolutely critical, because we will have a thriving economy if we do. And so how do we do that? I mean, what's your advice to, friends who come up to you?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of where I started. You have to have commercial savvy first. Don't call yourself a business person if you're not commercially savvy. You have to have a sense of commerce. You have to have a nose for kind of making money, because I don't care how awesome your product is. If it doesn't allow you to make money, your business is going to be dead in the water. So let's be clear about that. But equally, you have to have a great offering. Whether it's a superior product. And I mean, I look at, a guy who was a very good mate of mine, who was a very successful entrepreneur, is Laduma Ngogolo, who sells the Makosa brand. That product, what he sells is just superb. He sells a superior product by all means. And he's a great guy, and he's got a fantastic nose for business. He knows where he's going. He is unapologetic about the notion that he wants to make money, because he can only build his business and build a successful business and a Black business the more he makes money. So he doesn't hate money. He's got a very good relationship with making money. And that's why and he's great with relationships. I always say that a lot of the common sense of relationshiping, how you work with suppliers, how you work with your bankers, how you work with your customers, how you work with your employees, the common sense that brings it all together, the humility, the humanness, and all of those good qualities, being gracious, courteous, all of those good things, you have to learn. If you do not have those things, you're going to fail in business. No one wants to sit with an obnoxious person, a big-headed person who calls himself a business person. I don't want to buy a product from anyone like that. Now, I don't want to go and support a business like that. I think on the other side, I said, geez, I hate this guy. Why am I here? Why am I spending my money, in this person's business? And a lot of those things are common sense.
Yeah.
But common sense is an incredibly difficult thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's like you might be doing well, and you got to humble yourself, right?
Yeah.
And is that humanity in you to know that actually it's not about you?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a simple example, and I mean, this has always touched me as odd. When we owned, we sold flashy big BMWs, and we could drive any one of them, and they don't come as big as flashy as BMWs. The car that I really, really liked was the 2 Series. That's my car. That's my car. And people always say to me, but you can drive any of these fancy cars. Why don't you drive this car? Because I really love it. This is the one for me. I wasn't trying to show for making a point. It's just the car that I really liked.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've got a similar situation. I had a German sports car, and now I've got a Toyota Bucky. And my wife keeps on asking me, do I miss the sports car? I'm like, no, I actually don't. I don't know why, but I love this Bucky. It like allows me to do all the things I want to do.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, my 2 Series outlasted 2 German sports cars. I don't know which ones yours were. Doesn't matter. We don't need to have a conversation here. But there were 2 of the fancier ones from Stuttgart. I had 2 of them, and I forwent them because just firstly I didn't need them, and secondly I just really like my 2 Series.
Yeah. Well, I like my Bucky, so Toyota's doing well out of me, and the family. But I mean, there's often this I suppose this growth from executive to entrepreneur, but in a way you've changed that a little bit. You went from entrepreneur to executive, and geez, I don't know if I've got my figures right, but you run the biggest business unit at Nedbank, and I think about 2/3 of the people who work at Nedbank you account for. I mean, it's just the scale of what you're managing is unbelievable. And I can't help but think, is it because of that entrepreneurial spirit you're bringing to the bank?
I won't call it that, Ralf. I mean, it's probably a byproduct of what I think it is. The team that I look after at Nedbank was about 16,000 people, who find themselves reporting to me.
Sure. 16,000 people. That's a lot of people.
It is.
Do you sleep at night?
Beautifully. Yeah, I sleep beautifully at night. But I think there's a little bit of understanding humans. We all just kind of people. And it's all in a day's work, and we go in there to do the best that we can do for the investors who pay us our salaries, for the customers, importantly, who pay us, and for the businesses that give us the opportunity to live the lifestyles that we do, And you don't do that on your own. You do it because you work with the people that you do, That camaraderie I saw at the factory floor at General Motors, irrespective of who you are, we're here to do a job. So I lead with humanness. I lead with a lot of common sense, and common sense to me is just be human and authentic. So that comes intuitively to me. I don't have to make it up. That's what I bring to the party. And there must be something I do right, because I work with people. I go to work in my t-shirt.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people I get annoyed with. I should be wearing a fancy suit and a tie.
Yeah.
I wear them when I need to. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of bring your best self, be human, work as bloody hard as you can, and give it your best shot, and always obsess about your customers.
Yeah.
And I mean, understand that it's not about you.
I mean, we spoke a little bit earlier, but I mean, you're in a very competitive environment. I mean, the future of banking's both exciting and scary, and there's other people doing some good stuff as well, and disrupting the status quo. How are you getting your team performing, and what are the secrets to your success in moving the needle and competing in this, I suppose, high value market?
Yeah. So I mean, just be close. Understand what's going to create magic for customers. There's a reason why. Again, where I started, they're going to take the hard-earned rand and choose to give it to you, as opposed to giving it to the guy next to you who's doing the next shiny, fancy, magical things. And there's lots of guys in our world who are doing shiny, fancy, magical things.
Yeah.
And so that's important. If you understand your customers deeply and you understand the value that you give to them, you're more likely to have them stay with you than go to the next guy. So that's very important. And then the second thing is just be alive to the change that's happening around you. Just be alive to, I don't ever want to sit and think that I've got a big job and I'm the sitting duck who's being attacked by all those guys who bring in the new fancy shiny things. Listen, I'm going to give it back at you. I'm going to throw it back at you. You're going to come and steal business away from me. You're going to have to work bloody hard, because we're incredibly innovative, we're incredibly competitive, and we give as good as we get. And that culture of what it is that's going to make you be alive to that with the people that I work with is something very, very important. We have to be as hungry, if not hungrier, than a lot of our competitors, especially the young upstarts. So, just get them to feel a bit of pain as well.
I mean, and you are. I mean, you're winning awards, numerous awards, and the awards are stacking up. I saw, in numerous areas. So you're obviously doing something right. But I mean, I suppose what is the challenge at the moment with this digital first approach, and your digital journey? What do you think that is?
Yeah, it's probably more exciting than a challenge, Ralph. And I mean, a lot of people kind of think of that's kind of going to be digital wireless. I mean, first it must be common sense, it must be great to use a person, but go through a digital channel to do business with you. It must be a great experience. But so that's the one thing. But the second thing is that you need to understand that for every digital capability, there's always a human. People always look for the human touch. So we talk of this thing glibly in the business called, digital when you want it, human when you need it, So we haven't stopped investing in our people. I've got a team of people in my business that are absolutely world-class. I've always said I'm unashamed about saying that the people who serve clients at Nedbank are as good as any frontline that you will meet in any business anywhere in the world. That's the attitude that we invest in it, we train them, but we give them that sense of belief that when you're having a customer engagement, you're as good as the guy who's sitting at Starbucks in Canada in terms of client service, and or working at a top hotel somewhere in Bora Bora or some fancy place, you are that good. And we train them and we measure them. And when they struggle, we support them, or we move them on. And when they don't struggle and they shine, we reward them.
Yeah.
So that set of common sense values is incredible for me. So digital will succeed if it's got people sitting alongside it who are superstars as well.
Yeah, and you need the people alongside it. You've mentioned
100%.
You've mentioned a couple of things around common sense, but what you haven't talked around, which I know you're very famous for, is keeping it simple. And I wanted to ask you, because sometimes we make things complex unnecessarily. How do you frame things in your head when you're keeping things simple with the team? Because it's certainly a gift for you. Common sense is coming through, keeping it simple. Is there any sort of principles you apply to keep things simple and to stop the complexity or the overthinking?
Yeah. I can't think beyond the fingers on my head. I've got 5 in each hand. So if it's more than the fingers in my hand, I can't do it. I won't get to the 6th one. This I can see. So I've always got what I call the rule of 5. What are the 5 big focus areas? The 1, 2, 3, 4, maximum 5 key focus areas. What are the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big things that we're focused on delivering now in the next 5 weeks or 5 months? And we measure them and we deliver them. And number 5 drops off and gets replaced by something that comes in that top 5. So this rule of 5 always works for me, because I'm dumb. I can't think beyond 5. I'm not clever enough to think beyond 5. So that's kind of my rule for simplicity. There must not be more than 5 things that are preoccupying me at any point in time.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, I know we've run out of time. You're a very busy executive, but when we started talking, you spoke about your first hours in entrepreneurship, and you said, if I do not sell a car by 9 o'clock, this is not for me. And I thought to myself, this is unbelievable. You end up selling 2 cars to friends who came along. How important is it to have that goal, those outrageous, or I don't know, are they simple goals, to have those milestones that you keep yourself accountable at? Yeah.
Ralph, it's everything. It's everything. Otherwise, you get lost. You muddle about, and then you kind of like, we all go through it, and you think, oops, what was I doing again? Because if you don't have that focus, 2 cars by 9 o'clock, between now and 9 o'clock, something else is going to take your focus away. It's the rule of life, you know? So if you can't have that absolute clarity of thought and simplification that the next, between now and 9 o'clock is selling 2 cars, everything else is noise, then it helps you focus and drives your objectives. So I always say to people, whatever it is that you're 2 cars by 9 o'clock, you know, just stick to that, because otherwise you're going to get yourself faffing.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I saw that you mentioned something similar before. You said getting your team refocused all the time on the critical things is also part of your pearls of magic. Is, I suppose, in a way, it's taking away the clutter or refocusing.
Yeah, no, even, you know, and hopefully, you know, if you talk to my team, you know, if I sit with an individual, I mean, people will report directly to me, my direct team. I've got 13 incredibly talented and smart people who can probably process at the rate of 1,000 fingers at any point in time, unlike me with my 5. But I bring them back to the 5. You know, so I'll say to you, right, what are the 5 things today? So at any point in time, we're focused on those 5 things, and our conversations are around those 5 things. And I say, I will move mountains to support you on those 5 things. And if the world changes around us and the 5 become irrelevant, we'll deal about that. But right now, the main thing are these 5 things, and we deliver them.
Wow.
And that helps to clarify conversations, clarifies focuses energy, and does all of those wonderful things. And it creates easy contact of each other.
Wow, Ciko, it's been unbelievable talking to you, and you know, we wish you the best of luck with your role at Nedbank. You're certainly doing some great things. The awards are showing up. So thank you so much for your time on this podcast.
Ralf, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. This is fun. All the best.
Cheers.